You are listening to In Studio from Simply Timeless. My name is Jay Daniels. Jazz is a musical art form that brings listeners and musicians together from around the world. In fact, jazz music caught the attention of a young Tamuz Nissim while growing up with her family in Tel Aviv, Israel. After a number of stops along the way, Tamuz now resides in New York with her husband, guitarist Giorgos Nazos. You'll hear the story of how they met, along with how Tamuz's own Israeli heritage has influenced her music. We begin in Tel Aviv.
Yes, I was home for up about when I was 23, 24. And Tel Aviv is a beautiful city, and not only because of its scenery, it has some beautiful Bauhaus, little streets. It's right next to the sea, but also it has a very nice community feeling because even though it's the big city of Israel, and it's international and it's still small because Israel is a small country, so it does have a family feeling to it. And a funny story, just to get out of the subject for a second, when today my husband came for the first time to Israel, and we were walking around the street of Tel Aviv, going to get a coffee, meeting friends, I would say hello to a lot of people we just met in the street. And he said, "Who's that?" "Oh, was in high school with me." "Who's that?" "Oh, that's a musician." "Who's that?" "Oh, this person worked there when I was in high school." So after a while, in his like second, third, fourth visit, he was just like, "Just squeeze my hand whenever you see someone who was in high school with you." So it really does have that family kind of feeling, that close community feeling, even though it's a big city. But then again, as a big city, you can really be yourself and find yourself. It has a lot of great art scene, also for jazz music, for dance. My mom comes from the dance world, so I get to see a lot of dance and modern dance performances, great theater, classical music, great orchestras, galleries, everything. And then it will have the people who work in tech, and it will have that kind of business thing, and then it's going to have a more so it's really colorful. It has a lot of everything, so it has the good quality of every big city, I think, but in a smaller, cuter way.
Your family is quite talented in the arts. Tell us about the family that you come from, your parents, your grandparents, and any siblings you might have.
Okay, so one interesting thing about it is that my father's family and my mom's family come from very different backgrounds. My grandfather, from my father's side, he was born in Israel in the 20s, and his family is from Baghdad, Iraq, and the Jewish community of Iraq, which was there for many years, and they moved to Israel, some earlier on in the 20s and 1900, beginning of 1900, some later on. My grandmother came a little bit later. And then my mom's family, and my mom herself was born in Holland. So a Jewish family from Holland, and they moved to Israel in the 60s in a boat, stopped in Marseille, just to, and they came to Israel and settled in the south of Israel, which my father's family settled in Tel Aviv. So I grew up, my parents met in Tel Aviv, and even though they divorced, they have quite a romantic story of how they met. They were neighbors, and they each played music. My father played a classical piano, and my mom played a recorder, auto recorder. And they heard one another, and they said, "Oh, you were the one who played the piano, you're the one who played the flute, we should meet up and play together." And that's how they met. So as a little girl, we had, I mean, as you can imagine, a lot of music in the family. So my mom was a choreographer, and my father played piano as an amateur, as a hobby. But he was at the time working in the newspaper, and he's also a poet. He had other jobs, because poet is not something that brings, but that's his passion. And he always thanked me that no matter what else he's been doing, I always saw him as the poet. So, but recently he also got very nice rewarded for his last book. He received a big grant. So that's always been really nice. So I think the connection of writing my own lyrics, and then have the rhythm to it, and the understanding of rhythm that very much came from my mom. And my mom had a huge music collection. So when I got into music more seriously in high school and I started singing, she really, all I had to do is tell her, hey, do we have any Billie Holiday? And she was like, which one do you want? Do we have any Sarah Vaughan? Oh, here you have Art Blakey. Oh, here's Tom Waits, and I was really exposed to a wide range of music styles. Israeli music too, of course. A lot of great singers from Israel that I listened to. My
Yes.
grandmother, my mom's mom, she's 97-year-old at this time, and she is an incredible painter and illustrator. And my husband's CD cover, hit song, the CD cover is one of her paintings. So I found myself now during the pandemic, I have some more free time. I find myself drawing and painting for fun. And I remember, how she taught me as I was a kid, how to shade and how to. So, yeah, a lot of artists in the family.
Music and the arts, they were always around you. And you were speaking of this music library that you had at home. And you mentioned some of the artists that you would listen to. Even as a child, before you began to develop your own technique as not only a vocalist in later years, but also as a pianist, what were the things that connected most deeply with you?
I think that I don't know, as a very, very early age, I remember myself, going to the piano and just making up stuff, like when I discovered the pentatonic chord, in other words, the black keys of the piano. And I knew what variations meant because we were listening to Goldberg variations. So I remember I sat there and my mom had it on a cassette someplace, and I had one melody, and then I just kept on creating variations to the melody. So it must have been 3 or 4. But later on, like let's say in high school, I think that's where it really, really hit me, because I was playing the piano, classical piano, like a lot of kids do through primary school. At some point, I got far from it. I was doing dancing for a while. But then in high school, we were out of the city for a while and then came back to the city. And when we were outside of the city, I was a little bit of an outcast because I liked the art, I liked the music. I didn't really know who the Spice Girls was, stuff like that. So I felt like I needed to seem less artistic. And then as we moved back to the city, there was like a field trip or something like that. I guess we were like 13, 14. And one guy just took out the guitar and he just started singing stuff he wrote. And it was like nonsense songs, but they were funny. And everybody was digging it. And that's where I realized that, hey, it's okay to be yourself and just, so that was music was for me, I think, always. But I pretty much realized it at that time, that music is a place where you can truly, truly be yourself.
Here's an important question for you. Do you know who the Spice Girls are now?
I do. Well, in order to survive in school, I had to learn all their songs and.
Say You'll Be There from 96, I think, was a big hit of theirs. Not that I know any of their music, I'm just saying.
We know. It was just an example.
You used an interesting word to describe your connection with music, a lust for music. I found that description very peculiar. What attracted you most to jazz music in your teen years? You had been playing classical piano for several years. You were taking lessons, but then the old jazz bug bit you. How'd that happen?
I think so. I was in High School of the Arts, and there were different departments. And I was not in music department at the time. I was in painting department. And then I saw a concert of the music department, and I saw one of the singers, and I really liked that. So I asked to join, and the only way that they would take me is if I played them some piano, because I was not a singer then, So I played some Bach, and they took me in. And then I was just waiting for the right opportunity to tell them, hey, I want to sing. And the first song I sang on stage was Spinning Wheel from Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And I didn't know at the time, but I had to help the flutist to learn the solo. And I didn't know that that's transcribing of a solo and it's part of your learning to learn how to improvise. I was just like, okay, you want me to help you to figure out the notes of that solo so you can play it on the flute. Here, there you go. So, but something in the rhythm of jazz and this, it caught me. I liked it. But then we had a teacher who was my jazz piano teacher for a while, and he was the first person to like really got me into scatting. And he gave me the recording of Sarah Vaughan's Sassy Blues. And when I heard that, that was it. I was like, okay, whatever she was just doing, I want to know how to do that. I want to do that forever. It just hit me. A lot of people, they say I didn't choose music, music chose me. It just chose me. The scatting and the singing, and it chose me. So I was just there to listen.
How would you describe your voice as far as what qualities do you feel are part of that?
You will understand that as a vocalist yourself, there are periods in the development of one's technique, and also finding the balance between what you want to express emotionally and technically. But lately, I feel like I want my sound to be as caressing as possible. And also, my concept was always to not color my voice. So, I listen a lot of Sarah Vaughan. We said, but I'm not going to sing, look at me, I'm as helpless, because that's her sound. And that was her sound as she was speaking, So I'm not gonna sing night and day. You are the one. No, I'm gonna. So I always try to, I'm not gonna sound like Billie Holiday, even though I love her. She sounds same with many other people. So for me, the main goal was just to find my true color, my speaking voice, and my most natural form, vocal form. And then I believe that that's the true expression of my soul, my being. So I try not to color it with too much technique.
That is probably the hardest thing, is allowing your own voice to come through. There's a point I want to go back to that you brought up, and listening to what you call Israeli music. Would you explain what that means to you? What is presented with that? And then, has that been able to influence your own, as you put it, caressing sound as a jazz vocalist?
I don't know about the caressing sound, but let me tell you. So Israel, because it's such a melting pot of different cultures and different, it also shows in the music. There are a lot of different music styles. At some point, for example, I was asking myself the question you asked me before of why jazz, and I was questioning it, in my early 20s, and I went to my grandparents, and my Iraqi grandfather were like, what did you used to listen to as a kid, or what, and I went and listened to this music. So there was a singer, for example, Bracha Tzvira, that she has a very kind of harsh voice. She was Yemenite, and she was collaborating. I will send you something to listen later on. And she was collaborating with a pianist who was very Western educated, classical music composer, basically. And they were in Israel in the early 20s or something like that, before even the independence. And they were looking for Israel, to create what is the sound of Israel. So they took poetry of poets like Chaim Nachman Bialik and, some famous Hebrew poets. And they went around and they went in the desert and they stole a little bit, or were a little influenced by melodies they heard in Bedouin villages and, around more Arabic scales. And then they combined it with the Yemenite singing and Hebrew text from poets. And the harmony is very, kind of classical harmony, the 1-4-5 kind of thing. But it creates a very beautiful thing. So I was listening to that, those kind of songs. There was also another singers, but I think that the subject of using poetry as the lyrics is something that you find very often in Israel. There's also, other stuff. I remember as a kid there was I listened. There was like a children's show, and they were hosting musicians. So there was a woman, I don't remember her name now. She played the darbuka, and then there was another woman in one other episode that she sang, and that was Noah, the singer. You know her? Noah. She was the one that sang in "A Life is Beautiful That Way." No, and the Benini movie. Anyway, maybe she's more famous in Europe, but she's a wonderful singer. Wonderful singer. So I remember my mom said, "Okay, you like both of those singers. Let's go to the record store and let's listen to both of them, and you choose the one you like." And I got the Noah record, not the one with the darbuka, but I like both of them very much. So the thing with poetry and song comes very often, and actually that's nice. One of my favorite Israeli singers is Chava Alberstein, and I just got the chance to sing one of her songs in an album of an Israeli guitarist that lives in New York, Roni Ben Hur, and it's coming out in 2 or 3 days, March 5th.
And at some point, your ambitions began to go further beyond your home in Tel Aviv and the surrounding area. And I know there are many things to fill in. Describe, if you would, the journey on how you went from being at home to eventually moving here to New York City. It's not like you just decide, oh, I'm going to move to New York. Right. There were many, many steps that brought you here in that process.
True. Well, first of all, the New York scene is famous worldwide for jazz. So already from when I was in high school, there was this talk in the air of, there were musicians that were already living in New York, like older than me, that they were doing careers. And there were, there was this idea that if one is serious about jazz, the continuation of their path should be to go to New York. My path was a little bit different. I wanted to come to New York when I was in my early 20s, but financially it didn't work out, which I think was for the best in the end, because I like how my story turned out. And because I had a Dutch passport from my mom that was born in Holland, so I have double citizenship. So to be a student in the Netherlands, where they have a lot of very nice conservatories, very high-level conservatories, that are international, and you do your study in English, so it doesn't matter if you're from Israel, if you're from Greece, if you're from Spain, if you're from Korea, everybody gonna have a common language in English and not in Dutch, for writing essays and communicating. So it was much more affordable, much closer for the traveling, and I decided to go and give it a try. So I went to a conservatory in Rotterdam at first, but I wasn't happy with the school there, and they weren't happy with me. And we just clashed. What can you do? Sometimes it doesn't work. But I came very, I was already performing, and I was doing quite a lot of stuff, and it just didn't work. So, but the good thing that happened in Rotterdam is that I met Giorgos, who is a very important part of my life, and he's my husband, and he's the guitar player that I've been performing and playing with for almost 10 years now, even more, 11, 12 years or so. So after that, I changed the school. I stayed in Holland. I changed the school. I moved to The Hague. The Hague was affiliated also with the schools here, and Barry Harris and a lot of American musicians would come and give master classes there, and it was great. It was very, very international. I think my band in college was one of the more international ones, because people were enjoying to sticking with either Spanish, Israelis, Italian, and I just wanted to liberate myself to everything. My drummer was Korean, my pianist, she was Italian, and my bassist was Greek. That was my quartet when I lived there. And I almost did my first record with them, but in the end, I did that with some other musicians, but still with the same pianist. After I graduated, my husband and I, so Giorgos and I, we were in long-distance relationship for my last 2 years in Holland, because he graduated before me and he moved back to Athens, Greece. And it was not an easy decision to figure out, am I moving to Athens, is he coming, where are we going next? It was clear to me that Holland was a temporary stage of studying and meeting and growing, and after that should come a different decision. I didn't feel like going back to Israel. I felt like the journey has to continue somewhere else. I wasn't sure it was Athens, but I knew it has to be with Giorgos. So I did move to Athens, and we were supposed to stay there for 2 3 months, maximum 6 months of enjoying the sun and sea, and then probably move to London or New York. And we had so much job there. We done so many beautiful musical projects. A lot in jazz. We did a musical. We did a collaboration with a marvelous singer and lute player that plays traditional, and she's also a great composer. So I really felt like there's a great Jewish community there. We played a lot for the Jewish community. They are Ladino speaking, a lot of them. So I got to sing in Ladino, which is an ancient Hebrew language that came from Spain and is similar to Spanish in many ways. So I liked it. It was an unexpected place in the journey. I didn't do what a lot of my Israeli colleagues did, that I went from, okay, Tel Aviv, music high school, whatever, conservatory in Tel Aviv, New York, a new school. I didn't do that. My journey was completely different. I went to Holland, I went to Greece, and I feel like it gave me so much more spices as a person and as an artist, as a singer. And then at some point in Greece, we met an American. We were playing a duet in a Greek island for the whole summer, and it was beautiful. It was a lot of fun. Met people from all around the world, and it was an American guy, and he said, you are very talented. Were you ever thinking to come to New York? And I told him, yeah, it was an old dream of mine. And he says, well, if you ever decide to do that, I can host you in my place until, you settle, for the first week or two before you rent something. And we did it. We went to this guy's home. We stayed there for a week. Then we rented something in the Upper East that was surprisingly inexpensive. We figured out, can we move here officially? Can we get gigs here? We checked the ground, and we liked it. And the year after, we moved officially. You have to do the artist visa. There's another.
Yeah, it's not an easy process. We don't make it easy. I don't know why. I want to talk about you and Giorgos for a moment. You two met while you were in Holland. The first time that I had the pleasure of hearing both of you, it was during one of these virtual jam sessions that our mutual friend Jocelyn Medina put on last year. And I was struck by the chemistry between both of you in a musical sense. And I said, I don't know these two from Adam. I think there's more than music between these two. And I was right. So what was it that you think brought the two of you together? Not just as musicians, but as two people who would eventually marry. What was it? I guess, was there a chemistry at the start, or did that have to develop over time?
There was chemistry at the start. There was. We didn't get together right away, but once we got together, we were glued to one another, And then I feel like the 2.5 years of long distance has brought us at the end closer together as well. But a funny story, when we just met, first of all, Dutch people, and I know that also from my own family, they cannot pronounce the letter Z. So my name, Tamuz, has become Tamuz. And since I moved to Holland, I was Tamuz for a while. And I really don't like that pronunciation of my name. And I was hanging with a friend of mine who's also a singer. She was also a student. And we were in one of the jazz bars, jazz clubs in Rotterdam. And there was these two guys there, and I was smoking at the time. He bought a cigarette from me, and then we talked. He was like, what's your name? Tamuz. Oh, Tamuz, nice to meet you. And I was like, you're the first person who said my name right for the last month or two. So he said, of course, but that's easy. Your name's easy. I'm from Greece, and we pronounce stuff just as they're written, just as we hear them. It's more. So that was the first. Later on, we moved to another bar, and I realized that I'm not interested in anything at the moment. So I just told him, oh, what's your astrology sign. And he's like, I'm a Capricorn. I was like, oh yeah, I'm Gemini. I'm sorry, that's not gonna work. But it did work, and it's been working for a long time, and we're very happy. Musically, we did the first collaboration, official collaboration we did, was a little tour in Greece in 2009, and we had some very nice performances, also in Mykonos, in Naxos, and then in the north of Greece, in the mountains next to Bulgaria. And it was his trio that was with two other Greek guys, and we were doing a program. They did their own program and then a program with me, so two sets, one instrumental and one vocal. That was the first collaboration. And working together musically got better. Started a little shaky. I mean, we were connecting more on personal level, I think, in the beginning than musically, because I came from a very jazz, traditional Barry Harris school, bebop. And he was more, he came from guitar, heavy metal, into, fusion, into other stuff, into Bernie Kessel. So his journey was different than mine musically. So actually, in the beginning, it didn't always work so good, but later he opened up to a lot of other stuff, and I opened up to a lot of other things. So again, that was an experience that was very enriching musically. And the duo that we played together started as a necessity in the beginning. I mean, we enjoy play together, we always have, but some venues don't have big budget for a full band. So we said, okay, we can just do voice guitar or voice piano guitar. And the more time passed, it just became, it really feels like home. The duo, that you don't need more things happening around. I mean, we recorded two duets, one in my album, in Capturing Cloud. The last song is the Beatles, Here Comes the Sun. And I remember we listened to it after the studio session, and we were so touched by by your own version. Sometimes it feels like it can reach a place that you don't even remember how you did it. And then in his album, we recorded the Leonard Cohen song, Bird on a Wire.
I think that both of you have learned this very well, not only as a married couple, but also as two musicians. And that is, you have to listen to each other. So in the duo setting specifically, how do you listen to each other? And how does that both enhance your vocals and his instrumental accompaniment?
I think that in the beginning, because when it's just a voice and just guitar, I mean, think of the nature of the instrument. They are both, can be very expressive and very rich and very colorful, but also pretty vulnerable in a way. The voice is just a voice. The guitar has its own, it's not piano that can play the bass and play the chords and do, so it has, I think, an intimate settings already just to begin with. And then I think it's about choosing the repertoire, also the right repertoire for this setting. But beside that, there's a lot of space. And when you listen and there, to one another, and there is a lot of space, it can be intimidating. So I think the moment that we manage to ease into that space and learn to love it, and love the fact that it wasn't very extravagant and big, and that it was very subtle, that was the moment that the freedom came, And Giorgos is also, he developed, what he does with harmonics and the technique, and, his technique, and he's using a thumb to create 6 notes, 6 voicing chords. And sometimes he moves the bass line and the melody in a way that you rarely hear people do stuff like that. So his comping is very, very unique. So I leave him space to do his thing, and he leaves me space. And sometimes we reach to the moment of psychic communication, because we start a song and we know the big arrangement of the song, which is that there's not a lot of arrangement to the song except for, the rhythm, the key, and maybe an ending. Some of the songs have a fixed ending. Most of them don't. So the arrangement of the song is listen to one another. and sometimes it grows a lot, and magical things happen, and sometimes it's steady and good from the beginning till the end, and that's okay too. But yeah, it's fun.
There have been many wonderful moments in your career. You had a wonderful album come out last year, Capturing Clouds. We've been playing it on Simply Timeless. And even in a pandemic, you are finding so many ways to share your music. But was there a point in your career where things just seemed to be at their lowest? What I'm asking is, was there a point to where it seemed very difficult to be able to do what you do with music?
It's an interesting question. Look, of course, sometimes the dream is not as big. I mean, the reality is not as big as the dream. But that's okay. I mean, I was thinking that in movies and in stuff like that, they always show two different types of artists: the one who make it and they have gigantic careers, and then the ones who are depressed and suicidal and nobody knows them, and they only show these two sides. But hello, between these two people, that there are so many artists, actors and musicians and painters who are having wonderful careers, and they live and breathe their art and making money out of their art. And sometimes we tend to think of things as very to the extreme, either you make it or you don't make it. But for me, growing up in Israel, singing at the Blue Note or singing at the Lincoln Center is an incredible thing. I never I mean, okay, I could dream that to myself, but I could never, really, really see it happening. So I think that there are points that I get frustrated with the journey. I think it's normal. There was one song that I wrote in a low point like that. Now that you have the album, so you will listen to it in a little different way now that I tell you. Ray of Hope. I wrote it in a moment like that. I wrote it when I felt like, the pieces of the puzzle are there, but they didn't really get together the way I wanted them to, and I felt a little bit down about that. And the song starts and it says, I want to be younger with dreams that aren't broken, to be living life as naive. I want to be bolder and speak out my truth without caring what if or who will, say it to. And then in the end, it says, but then I remember that you are still here, my ray of hope and joy. So, and I think that comes, I remind this to myself in life, and it doesn't have to be a specific you as to Giorgos or a specific you as to me. It can also be the part of me that is grateful for the things I've been through and for the things I learn and I'm learning. So I think that, always find the light in every situation is truly important. And I try to bring it to people through my music too. I was like, okay, I have that lyrics I wrote to Smile. And Smile is like, okay, smile. And then I start my vocalism, and it's like, everything is gloomy and it's not the right time to it's not so easy to smile. You can say it, but it's harder to do it. You can listen. But then I say that, you have to appreciate the little things in life that makes you happy, good friend, moments of, the moments that you are happy. So I don't know if it answers your question, but I think so.
It does. It does. And it made me think about something. You can write a song with a certain intent behind it. As you mentioned with Ray of Hope, this was your reasoning for writing this song. This is where you were. This is where you were coming from. But it's interesting. People can think of the songs in many different ways, and it all depends on their story and what they bring with them when they listen to that. And I think you get that when you go to your concerts, when you look out at the people. You don't know what they bring with them from the days before. All you can do is bring them your music. how do you think that your music, your vocal technique, your talent, how do you think those things help to enrich the ongoing evolution of jazz?
So I think that first of all, jazz that is a form of American music, but it's also more than that. I see it as a form of communication, and maybe it has something to do with the fact also that again I went to study in a place that was very, very international. So I saw how Spanish people and Italian people and Greek people and Korean people and people from all over the world relate to jazz. You know, they were like magnetized into a place. New York is the same. You know, you meet people from everywhere that they just came here for that art form, and I think that it's. And I don't know if this is on the biggest stages, it might be on the smaller stages, but I think that it's really opening up into a more personal place. I mean, if you think about lyrics, right, of the jazz standards, they are from, and a lot of them were written in difficult times. I mean, I think that when they wrote "Let's Face the Music and Dance," I mean, wasn't that during the war? And he wrote, "Let's face the music and dance." So this music, not only in terms of okay, you know, there are the changes, and you can take a pop song or a song from your country and jazz arrangement it, you know, add some sevens, add some 2/5s, add some chromatics. I don't know. Yeah, you make it jazzy, but I think it's more than that. And lyrics wise, I think it's developing into a more personal place. At least in my music, that's what I'm trying to do. I don't want to be that something of the old days, of the good old days. You know, I want to be me that is now, and with what I feel. And sometimes what I feel, people, as you say, people come from different places and they can relate to it. Like I remember when I wrote Broken Promises, my first album, and it still is you know, because you do a few albums and you don't always play all this repertoire and all your gigs, but this is a one song that whenever I have a quartet gig, I always do it on the piano, almost always. And if I don't, maybe somebody is requesting for it. And after I wrote Broken Promises, it starts with a packet of broken promises, you are walking away. And I really wish, you know, it's like a torch song, a breakup. And I didn't experience a breakup at the time. You know, but I felt what my roommate was feeling, what other people, what I felt in the past. You know, it was a story, just a story that I felt that I needed to tell, but it wasn't a literal my story. But the way that this song is touching people has amazed me in many ways. When it was first played in Israel on the radio, the woman from the show, she called me the day after and she said, "I wanted to congratulate you for your album. I played Broken Promises." People called the studio to ask what it was and who was it that sang. And another lady, she bought my CD and then she sent me an email and she said, "I have to meet you. I have to tell you my story. You were singing about me." You know, and we had lunch and she told me all her love story of her life, you know. So it's really interesting how music can be, because, you know, if you sing, "I remember you, da 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 da," it's beautiful. But sometimes it's almost too general, that is not as touching. So I think to bring the music and that, you know, Capturing Cloud was also about the uncertainty in jazz, you know, because how can you capture a cloud? How can you capture a moment? You know, how can you capture something that's improvised? You go to the studio, you record it, okay, it's captured. But it's improvised. You go to a concert, you play it, it's different. So I like that. I like the personal, the really like expose the way that it touches people in their place, in their story. And then I like the unknown. You played like Someone in Love. We didn't plan it at all. I just said, let's do a song that we didn't practice. And we went into this, like, which song? I was like, okay, let's do bass and drum. Let's do like Someone in Love here. And I mean, they knew my key and we just did it. It was a one take. And I like to be wild like that. With, you know, I like the unknown.
I have one final question. There are many more I could ask, but I will ask this one, and then we'll do another interview down the road. Why music?
Why not? It's wonderful. Why music? So I mentioned that I was dancing as a younger girl, and being my mom's daughter, they always saw me, and I had a good posture. I hope I still do with the phones. It's hard to tell, but and they always told me, you'll be a dancer like your mommy. You'll be a dancer like your mommy. And I felt like they already paved the thing for me. And I went on and I did auditions. And when I was 9, I was doing the kid part in the Nutcracker, and we had shows all around the country, and it was a lot of fun. And we had the makeup and we had the clothes, and every time that excitement when you go up on stage, and it was great. And then we went, the shows were finished, the season was over. We went back to the ballet studio, and we were doing exercise on the bar, and I was getting so bored. And I told my mama, I think I want to quit. And it was so hard to tell her, even though she's very cool about everything, my mom, but I want to quit ballet. And she said, okay. She says, look, it's obvious that you love the stage, because I told her, I had so much fun in the Nutcracker, but now that we are just doing point, flex, and plie and releve and all, it's just I'm getting bored of it. It's not exciting for me. I want to perform again, but I don't want to do that work that leads to the performance. So she said, it's totally understandable. It's not your thing. You can like it as a hobby, as an extra thing. But she said, like, when you will find your thing, you will enjoy the everyday hard work that leads to the performance. And that's very true with music. I mean, I can get lost in practicing. And if it's, and it's really, I think that was so wise. I was so young. Maybe I was 12, 11, I was pretty young. And she said this, you obviously like the stage, you're going to find your thing. It will probably involve the stage, but you will enjoy the everyday hard work of the practice that will make you good at this craft. And that's music. I enjoy every inch of music, not only being on stage. I enjoy the process. I enjoy the voice technique. I enjoy the scales. I enjoy the composing. I enjoy the teaching. I just love it, head to toes. Every day, every weather.
Tamuz Nissim, our guest for this week's In Studio from Simply Timeless. Be sure and visit her website, tamuzmusic.com. I want to say thank you to Tamuz and Giorgos for their friendship and support of our continued work. See you soon. And a special word of thanks to you, our listener, for joining us. Until next time, I'm Jay Daniels. You've been listening to In Studio from Simply Timeless.